All right, hello and welcome to this week's community call. Today we're going to go over the markets and what we might be able to expect this week. We have some big events. We have the PMI data tomorrow morning, and that is basically where it's a metric used for manufacturing and service and how well that's doing in the country. I left a bunch of info in the news and events chat that you can check out there to learn about that. And then on Thursday we have GDP, which is gross domestic product, and that is another big new news release. So I do expect volatility around those events. I'm starting to see the downside on DXY like I was anticipating, and I'm starting to see a little bit of upside on crypto and equities as I was anticipated. If you remember or were here last week, you would have heard me start feeling like we were starting to turn a corner here, and I'm starting to see that happen. Now, the question is does it continue? Looking at DXY, which is the dollar index strength, we've broken this smaller trend here. However, we're kind of riding this really large one, right? So I do anticipate coming back down to this green line at some point. Again, the question is when. We are at a pivotal 1.618 retracement extension here, actually. So if we just zoom out, I've just drawn this downtrend, and we've gotten up to the 1.618, which is typically an area of retracement. It will typically hit that spot and have some sort of reaction. If it doesn't, then typically we will find the 2.272. So that's obviously a very, very large increase from here. And we are very overbought. And this pattern that we have, that Adam and Eve pattern that I mentioned, I was noticing last week, is now starting to play out a little bit more. If we look at the weekly candle, we have a bearish engulfing. So it's just like these down here. And you can see at least for 1 week following these, we had some downside. So bearish engulfing, downside, bearish engulfing, downside. And now we've got another bearish engulfing right there. So I do think we are going to have a green week, at least if the dollar strength weakens, and in reaction to that, equities and crypto go up. Typically, I would think equities would go up a little bit better than crypto, which is why I'm trading more on equities right now than crypto itself. If we go back here, you can kind of just look at these circles and see the results after those bearish engulfing candles. We have broken this trend, and we're currently coming back up at the moment to retest the EMAs after we close the candle below both of them. And typically when a candle blasts through both EMAs in one shot, that's a pretty bearish signal, and typically, more often than not, will result in further downside. So the question after that is how much? How much does it keep going? Are we turning a corner for a long period of time, or is this just going to be another little relief bounce? Looking at the stablecoin dominance, USDT, you can see we are in a rising wedge pattern here, as well as possibly another Adam and Eve pattern. Kind of need to see more of this if this is going to end up being a full curve or not. If it is, we're kind of at the apex of it here at the top, but here's our pointed top, followed by a kind of a curve. But the bigger thing I'm looking at is the rising wedge, which is typically a bearish pattern. And nobody's telling me they can't see my screen, so that's good. With any pattern that you have, there's always going to be a midline, and a lot of people forget about the midline. So for example, we have this rising wedge, right? Well, try to find the midline that's inside that pattern, and if you look, it's right here. So it's just another area of support and resistance, where when it breaks down, it has some further downside. When it breaks up, it has further upside. You can see we came up and top of the wedge here, came down, tapped that midline as support, made another move back up, tapped it again, and now we've broken it for the first time since September 9th. So that's quite a while ago. So I do think we will see the bottom of this wedge now, just because of that candle. However, it might take a little bit to get there. I don't know. So we'll see. But that's just another thing I'm watching. If this wedge ultimately breaks altogether, that's going to be really good for crypto itself, and we can see a nice rally. It will probably find support at the 0.5 here first. Also, keep in mind, so I have this downtrend is what I'm measuring to find like this golden pocket where, you know, the USDT dominance wants to keep rejecting. But once we have this top and this wedge breaks, well, you're going to want to switch it up. You're going to want to erase this fib, and you're going to want to draw this one from here to the top. Why? Well, because now we have confirmation that this trend has finished, and we are going to start a new trend. And now this is what we can measure to start finding out where we could possibly retrace to the downside. So always remember, don't get stuck on one fib set for too long. Sometimes I do that myself. I'll just keep using the same one, and the trends changed, and I'm like, why isn't it working so well? And it's another reason why every week or 2 weeks, I like to change my charts completely, just erase everything and start over. For one, it's good practice, and for two, you'll see things that you didn't see before. So it's just good practice. Now, since we've been so sideways for so long, I've kind of fallen out of that habit of redrawing because everything's still within the same range, and there really hasn't been any need to change things. But if we do start getting this move in another direction, then we are going to have to start redrawing things. So looking at Bitcoin CME, we got a gap, our first gap in a while. So if we look here, we opened or closed Friday somewhere around 19.2, which is that all important level that I keep talking about. And now we've gapped up here. So now the question is do we keep going or do we fill this gap first? You can see how close the 8 EMA is on the weekly, and this has been our big resistance for 2 months, probably more. We've been over it once in this bear market. So this is our big hurdle. I want to see a candle close over that 8 EMA on the weekly. I'll feel much better about longing stuff if that happens. Also notice that we are in a falling wedge here, so the opposite of USDT, which makes sense. So if we see the wedge pop to the upside, then we can start trading long to the areas like the 382.5 golden pocket up here where the 21 EMA is kind of floating down below. Coming in, if we pop our pivots on, well, look at that. We got 21 EMA, pivot in the golden pocket right at the 0.68. A lot of confluence here. So if we do get this move that I think we might get and break that wedge, then this is going to be our ultimate target for this little play here. And then ultimately we need to break the downtrend, which is this red line, which is really far away still. So yet to be seen. Should this reject and fall back down to the bottom of this wedge, it's still in a bullish pattern until it breaks below the wedge, which then of course would give us lower lows. Everybody might start freaking out. And then we got all these levels down here that we could possibly anticipate. I got 16K, 13,375, and then ultimately down here around 11, 12. So there's a gap still at 11,205 to 11,225. Those would then be the targets there. However, we do have bullish divergence where the price is pointing down and the RSI is pointing up. So is the MACD. These are all just those little signs that I've been talking about for over a week now that are starting to show me that we could potentially make a move the other way here. And so far, I still think that chance is very real. But once again, make sure don't go crazy unless we get a close over this 8 EMA, which just so happens to be the top of this wedge here at the same time. So we want to get up over that somewhere around we want to get over 20K ultimately on the CME chart. Now, ETH's doing quite a bit better. So looking at the dominance factors, here's dominance. So Bitcoin dominance is kind of falling a little bit. However, it is still bullish on an 821 EMA aspect. And if we look at Ethereum dominance, it has made a nice move. So alts are kind of moving a little better than Bitcoin. Again, not something I really want to see. I would much rather see Bitcoin taking over here, but it's not happening yet. So as a result, Ethereum is doing better. And there's a gap here as well. So we got down to that 1309 level, which we kept rejecting for quite a while. Finally gapped up over it. And now we've made a move over all the EMAs. So, kind of curious to see what happens here. We got pivots way up there and way down here, and we haven't touched any of them in a while. So still kind of just 50-50 here. Being over both EMAs is great. However, they're not crossed yet. So there's a very likely chance this comes back down to start letting these EMAs catch up until it does cross. But who knows? It's crypto. It could just blast up to pivot. So looking at the stock market, if we're using DXY as any correlation, I'm thinking we're going to get another move down here this week, which means equities would make a move up. And the targets that I have are the 21 EMA for the S&P. And that is because we have just opened our candle over the 8 EMA. There's a support line here for my fibs, and we got the 21 EMA coming right down in the same spot on the weekly as my 14-year trend line that I talked about quite often. So typically, if we just zoom all the way out here over the last 14 years, if you were able to buy the S&P 500 underneath that trend line, you had a very, very good deal. Like, that was an amazing opportunity to buy every time it peaked underneath this line. Right now, it is under the line. So if we just go on a chart basis and ignore everything that's happening in the world, this would be another great time to buy. And you can see now every time it gets under it, it gets bought up, comes down, and now we're under it, and it looks like we're getting bought up again. We found support on a major support line here, which is based off of this previous resistance. You can see it wicked perfectly through there and still managed to close above that level. Looking at the RSI and MACD here as well, we have divergence where this is pointing up and this is pointing down. And we can even draw one on the MACD as well. And it's the same thing. So another sign that this might be turning around. Looking at the NASDAQ, kind of the same story. We got divergence down below on the RSI, and this is on a weekly chart, so this is a big deal. When you find divergence on high time frames, you want to pay attention to what's going to happen next, because it could mean something. I'm trying to draw this trend line and it's not cooperating. So anyway, you can see it pointing up here. We hit the 0.5 perfectly on this retrace, and I just drew from the COVID lows to the all-time high. And you can clearly see that this 0.5 is a very big spot. So I'm thinking the S&P or the NASDAQ has a lot more ground to cover to catch up to the S&P. I think the NASDAQ's down something like 30-something%, and the S&P was closer to the high 20s. So the NASDAQ has performed way worse than the S&P 500, and crypto typically will follow the NASDAQ more than anything else if it's going to be correlated at all. So we want to pay attention to the NASDAQ more. Again, the target would be if it can get over this 8 EMA, because you can see the S&P is ahead a little bit. It's still underneath. But if we throw on our pivots, we got a nice little area up here where S2 and the 21 is. And if we go back to the S&P and throw on pivots, you can see there's a nice confluence up here where our trend line is, where S1 is, and where this 236 is. So there's a whole lot up here pointing to this spot. Let's see. So let's go into the spot charts. So Bitcoin index. You can see how tight all of these support and resistance lines are in this area. And that's why we're kind of just trading in a very tight zone, because there's so many little support and resistance spots. That 19.2 level I have here in blue is probably the most important. It is the point of control. It is where everything is oscillating from. When we're under it, we come back up to it. When we're over it, we come back down to it. So we want to see that used as support over and over again. And what I would usually do is kind of go to a 4-hour chart to verify that. And so you can see that blue line there. And every time it comes back down to it, it doesn't want to hold support. It wants to fall through and use it as resistance every single time. It gets over, it will fall back below. So I've yet to really see it be used as support. Even on this most recent move today, It's not. It's just like riding under it, and then it'll make a move over. But then every time it does, it wants to come back. So I still want to see it use it and bounce off of it. And that would make me feel a little better about the long that I currently have. So looking at Ethereum spot, we have one of these bearish triangles that everybody likes to point out all the time and say, oh, it's bearish. But, you know, this one wasn't. So not all of them are going to be bearish. I think the probabilities are 60%. So that leaves a lot of room for error on these. It's going to be bearish every single time until it's not one day, right? And it's going to take everybody by surprise. And I mentioned this in the last community call as well, how one of these days it's just going to pop and it's going to go in the complete opposite direction that everybody thinks it's going to go in. And then all of a sudden everybody's going to be bullish again just in time for it to fall. That's how a bear market works. That's how consolidation works and accumulation. It's going to do most likely the opposite of what you think it's going to do almost every single time. And that's why, because you're a retail trader. And if you're feeling a certain way about the market, it's because the powers that be who are manipulating these things want you to feel that way. So it's all about psychology. The areas of confluence we have here, the pivot and the 0.5, the S1 down here at the bottom of the golden pocket. So still in between, but our daily time frame is now looking bullish. 821 about to cross. So we're going to keep an eye on that over the next couple of days. Bitcoin still has a ways to go. Let me turn this off. Oh, actually it is. Oh no, it's a 4 hour. Yeah, still a little bit to go. It's not cross bullish yet. But again, just because it doesn't mean anything. We can see the last time it happened, we were bullish for a day and then fell. So totally possible for that to happen again. However, we're paying attention to the little things that are pointing to some sort of reversal, right? So we're going to keep monitoring that during the week. And I'm kind of excited. I hope we get something. Like, I don't care if it goes down. I don't care if it goes up. I just want it to go somewhere because right now it's pretty boring. Looking at some of my favorite tickers this week, I'm going to start with Matic because last week we were talking about it breaking this downtrend here, and it did. And so looking on the daily, let's count back 7. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we were here when we were looking at this last week, and I said 0.91 was going to be our target, and it looks like we just hit it not very long ago. Looks like about an hour ago probably. So that target hit, but you would have had to have held it through all of this dip down to 77 cents. So they're not going to make it easy. I didn't trade it. I should have probably tried it down here at this trend line, but you can see that wick right there probably would have stopped me out anyway, below pivot and everything. XRP is still one I'm watching. I still think it has a good shot to get to 59, close to 60 cents here, based on this previous downtrend. And I got these arrows marked just to kind of show this pattern. So if you kind of split this down the middle where my cursor is, it kind of is like a mirror image almost. And these yellow arrows are what I'm expecting to see repeat. So I'm expecting like a wick like this to come up here to tap that line at some point. We can see on the weekly, the 821 is very close. Oh, it just crossed. So our 821 weekly just crossed on XRP. So technically on the weekly, this is now bullish. So if we're going to try it along this, which it is going to be risky because it is a bear market, but you can take your calculated risk. We can find the EMAs and this 236 all in the same spot here. Let's see if pivots help. No, not there. Let's see if they help here. Look at that. So we got a pivot and we got the 821 EMAs crossed bullish on the weekly and this pivot and the 236 all in the same exact spot, which is why I have this arrow here. So if you wanted to try along, that's where I would try to nab it. It's as close to this line here as possible, around 45 cents. The target would then be the top of this trend line, or maybe the 382, depending on how long it takes. The longer it takes, the more likely it is to hit the trend line as resistance and not the 382 itself, if that makes sense. If it happens faster, well, then it can go up and tag both of them within the next couple weeks or so, right? So if it takes longer than 2 weeks, now we're starting to look at the trend line instead of the 382 as our take profit spot. ENS. Let's go to ENS. All right, so this is the chart that I'm comparing to Quant before it made its big run. And we've now retested the 8 EMA twice since it's crossed bullish. And that is where you want to try to take it long. Not only that, but it's very close to this yellow trend line that is a little clearer if I go onto the daily chart. So you can see this. We can wick below and still stay in the trade. On the daily, however, this looks like it could be crossing bullish or bearish now. So we want to watch out for that. If it does and breaks this trend line, then we don't really want to be involved anymore. We'd have to remeasure, but I can't really measure this uptrend yet until I know it's finished, but I can try. So if we went from bottom to top, we're hitting the 236 right now, right where that trend line hit at the same time. So that would have been the area at 16 that I was talking about, where I would have wanted to try, but I missed it this morning. So I don't really want to chase it. If it does come back down and give me another shot, then I will try to take ENS at 16 or as close to 16 as possible with a stop loss just below to minimize risk. Because you can be real tight with these things. And in a bear market, I want to be really tight. I don't want to have a whole lot of risk sitting on the table. So my stop loss would be like $15.75, 25 cents a token. That's all I'd risk on that if I can nail it at $16. Quant, I haven't looked at it yet, but I think it should have been coming down. So that's a pretty top candle right there. Probably still going to come down. Weekly chart, golden pocket sell off, typical. If it's going to continue, it needs to come down and find its support around this 0.5 and the 21 EMA, which could take 1 or 2 weeks to come down there back to the 131 level, where I will most likely grab some and just hold on to it, because I think this thing's strong. If it eventually crosses bearish on the weekly again, then obviously you want to get out, but strongest token in the market still. Another one I'm watching closely is Alliance Block, because it has a very big downtrend, and it just technically broke it with this candle close here. You can see it closed above the downtrend. So if we go into the daily, we've had an 821 break for a long time, since October 3rd. I wasn't watching this token, I just started hearing some buzz about it, so I went to look at the chart, and I like it. So you want to try to get your retest here, right? So we broke, and we got one retest here. Now sideways, we could get another retest where the 21 EMA meets the trend line itself. If we throw on pivots, look at that. R3 is right there on the daily. We got all of this showing a good spot of support. So that's where I would try to nab it long and then keep my stop loss just underneath all those things for a minimal risk. And that's how you should be trading, keeping your risk small, especially in a bear market, especially if you're going to long something. Obviously, it's much easier to short, and in which case you still want to make sure your entries are pretty good, because this is all just sideways motion, and it's very hard to trade sideways motion. So you got to be picky with what you trade and how you pick your entries and how you pick your stops. So with that, I will take chart requests if anybody has any. If not, we could just end the call. Normally there's people chatting by now, but I don't see anyone chatting. Does anybody have any questions about what I went over or anything? Feel free to pop in on voice as well, because I would much rather talk to you guys than just see you type. So, Bilson, can we look at Adam? Yes, absolutely. Let's see. Let's go to Adam. Where is it? There we go. All right, so it's still in that flag pattern that it's been in for a while. If we look at the weekly, it looks like a really cool flag pattern. Like, you don't get many of these. It's pretty nice looking. So ultimately, if you can grab this at 10 bucks, I think it'd be worth a shot. However, the weekly is still bearish and kind of like rolling over here. So it's not pretty, right? But like $10 is a really great psychological support and resistance, just because it's a whole number. It's also the 0.5 retracement of this uptrend. And there's also a pivot right around 1030. So if we do get the chance to see that again, I would try to grab some Atom at 10 bucks with just a stop loss underneath it. You can see how much room there is down here. So if it breaks this, then it's fallen probably another, more than 10% from there. So you do want to keep your stop kind of tight, knowing that it could possibly wick you out. So I would probably go off of one of these candles back here. You can see this was support before. So I would probably have to keep my stop like right underneath that candle. So if we get it at 10 bucks, be around 960 would be the stop. If we break above this flag, even better, because that allows us to have a better entry. And I had my alert here and it never went off. You can see it came really close with that candle. But that's where I would have tried to long it. So now I'm going to move my alert down. So that way I know when it breaks this flag. And then what you want to try to do is either take the break, knowing where your take profit spots are up here. But typically when you have a bull flag this big and it breaks to the upside, the move is going to be very big. At which point you're going to want to measure this top to this bottom to find your take profit spots, right? And so the 1350 area looks like a hot spot, and then you got to pivot up here. So anywhere up in this zone would be the take profit range. Obviously the golden pocket would be next. And if it gets through all of that and we start turning bullish on Atom again, then you know where the greed and FOMO kicks in, is in these blue areas. And then things can go and make new highs. I almost said all time, but we're definitely far away from that. Anything the chart can tell us about Aptos? Gosh, I don't think I've ever even tried to chart that. Is that available? Great. Anybody know where it started? It's brand new, huh? It's everywhere already. So maybe FTX. Oh God, this is gonna be hard to chart. I'm gonna go to like a 1 hour. Is there more history on this? Like maybe it was traded on a DEX before it was on a SEX, do you know? Like before it was on a centralized exchange? So I can find more history. Finance. Well, it looks the same. So let's see here. It's hard to chart when there's very little history, especially when it starts off like this craziness. And you don't know if it's just the exchange dropping it in or if that's actually the way it traded. So the only thing you really have is this uptrend here to just measure what we could possibly get on a retracement. I guess we'd have to bring it down here. It's hard. I'd have to start here. So 382 bounce, that's the sign of a strong uptrend. However, it's currently looking like it's making a lower high, so it could continue to retrace, and you're going to want to draw your trend lines like this to start seeing if you can find a pattern of some sort. So some sort of parallel channel along those lines, and then if it breaks that, then you could potentially see a new high. And then if it does start moving up again from here, you're going to want to measure, even though it's a 15-minute chart, it still works. You can see it sold off in the golden pocket and made a move down. We're under the 0.5. You got to use low time frames on this because there's no history, which makes it very risky and unreliable at the same time. But you want to be over the 0.5 here, at least at minimum. And you're seeing this trade bearish here on the 821. But that's a 15-minute chart. Hour chart, we're in between, so it's kind of a no trade. 4 hour, we're way up here. RSI is unreadable because it's so new. But I would say this is starting to look like a top on a 4 hour. However, it's looking a little like a pennant. So it's something like that. And like that. So I would kind of wait and see how this finishes in the next, 12 hours? In 12 hours, it should make a move out of this, what looks like a pennant pattern forming. So you can see it here. You want to come down to the bottom. So something along those lines, I would wait for it to leave here to trade this before I made a decision. Yeah, it's hard when it's new. I entered ENS around 17.7. What should be the strategy at this point? Hold and wait for a bounce or get out and cut the losses? So it depends on if you bought spot or if you are leverage trading. I would say if you bought spot, then you could probably just kind of hold it and see what happens. ENS, like if I was going to get out, it would be if it broke 16. Where did it go? I had it. Here it is. So if it breaks this 16 level here, that's when I would probably start thinking about getting out, because not only is that a fib line, it's also this major trend here that you can see from bottom to top. And so if this trend breaks, then yeah, we don't want to be involved in this anymore. On the daily, the 821 looks like it might cross soon. So this needs to kind of start recovering quickly to curl back up, which kind of looks like a little bit of a rounded bottom, and potentially make it so these EMAs don't cross and we start to get this little curl, which happens quite often, more than you think, especially on low time frames, where things start looking like they're going to go bearish and then they ultimately don't. I'd have to find a good example of that to show you, but it happens quite often. Soul. Soul. I don't even know what that trend line is. It's going through everything. Okay, so that's the downtrend from pretty far away. I haven't looked at it in a while. Still looks like a head and shoulders. It's broken the 382 here, but you can see where on its previous run up, these were like the places where it wicked really hard and found support. And we kind of only had one of those here so far. And now we're just chilling in that area. It's not like a big volatility area anymore like it used to be. So it's not looking great. 821 sucks here. 821 sucks here. It's not even close. It could make a move back up to 31.43 where the 8 EMA on the weekly is approaching 382. But, this is definitely worse than most at the moment. Worse than Bitcoin and ETH by far, and even many alts. So you can see how far down the 0.5 is. If it's going to complete this big head and shoulders pattern, that would be pretty bad all the way down to 16. But that'd be where I would consider maybe buying it if you think Sol's going to be something in the future. I have my doubts, just based on the fact that I don't know how much room there is for layer ones in crypto when, there's no real adoption yet. Ultimately, that's the downtrend, and that's really far away. When you look at Bitcoin, however, let's see, which one was it? So here's the downtrend here on Bitcoin that I'm monitoring, and actually it's not that one, it's this one. So if we look at Bitcoin and these levels here, you can see how far away the downtrend is on a log chart. But like I mentioned a little while ago, if you go into linear mode, we have broken the downtrend, and it's just been sideways since it broke. So, linear mode is okay for trend lines because trend lines are straight. In log mode, trend lines are technically a curve. So you want to make sure you use linear mode on some time frames too, just to check out for chart patterns. There's certain patterns you can't find on log mode. So for example, here's kind of a falling wedge, right? If you kind of take into account here. And so if that's the case, we're breaking out of this falling wedge to the upside, technically, even though it's just sideways. So it's just something I'm watching. Sol does not look good. All right, if there are no more chart requests, thank you for joining, and I'm going to post the recording in GNS. One more request. GNS. Is this also new, or did it just get listed? Not new. All right, then I got to do some playing. Okay, this looks better. Maybe not. That doesn't look very good either. Okay, so that is it then. Gains network with die as the comparison, because let me see how much history this has. Still not a lot. So let's just see if I multiplied by ETH. Let's go with that one. All right, so really all you could do here is measure this downtrend to get your extensions. So go from there to the bottom. And that 2.272 is going to be your take profit for sure. Almost every time. It's kind of an anomaly if crypto retraces further than the 2.272 after measuring a downtrend. So that would be where I would take profits on that. However, if it does get through, you can see how much room there is, right? To the next fib, it's pretty far away. Put on our pivots. We're well, there's nothing to really go by here. Yeah. So well above the 8 EMA, there's a lot of space in between here. You can see this is definitely a resistance at the 2.272 on a couple candles. However, it did make a higher high, so that's a good sign. It's still a hold. I wouldn't buy it here, but if you're already in it, you can hold it until it closes a candle below the 8 EMA here on the daily. And if it does close a candle below, then that would be your sell spot or your take profit spot potentially. And then you'd want to re-enter somewhere around this 1.68 in the 21 to try to go for more with the stop just below. That's how I would trade that. But I wouldn't buy it here. I would just hold it if I already had it. All right, any more chart requests? Going once, going twice. All right, I'll see y'all in the chat this week. I look forward to tomorrow morning. We should see some volatility with the PMI data. And then Thursday on GDP. So thank you for joining, and I'll see you later.